Turn one soul ring.
So when I went to Fusion last night, I was playing SRAM, and I actually had quite a comeback and won the game. And so I was playing SRAM, and my opponents, one guy was playing like a Corvold deck, one guy was playing Taste of Karlov, one guy was playing the Dragon. I pretty much started off with like a land tax, and but I didn't have any ramp the entire game except Terrain Generator. Do you know that land?
No.
It's taps for colorless, and you can pay 2 and put a basic land from your hand into play tapped, and you have to tap it. You have to tap Terrain Generator to do it. So not the best ramp, but in like a monocolor deck, it's okay.
And I guess with land tax, you're like getting the lands in your hand anyways. So
Yeah, and
it's a nice little.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough to have a reliquary tower in like my opening hand, so like I was able to hold all the lands and not like discard them.
It's a nice opening hand.
Yeah, it wasn't bad, but I got hit with like a Pernicious Deed on like turn 5, so it completely wiped my board because I just had like SRAM and a bunch of like 1 or 2 drop equipments, and then it really wasn't doing much for the rest of the game. But eventually the Corvold guy got taken out, and then on one turn I had SRAM on the battlefield and like a bunch of mana because this was like late in the game. And I was able to put a Hammer of Nizan on SRAM. That's the one that, when it comes into play, it gives +2/+0 and indestructible. And when it comes into play, when it and any equipment comes into play, you can put you immediately attach it to a creature you control. So I Hammer Nizan onto SRAM, and then I played like Prowler's Helm. That's the one that makes it can't be blocked except by walls. And then I did an Enlightened Tutor to get Imperial Plate, which is this. It's like you get +1/+1 for each card in your hand.
Isn't it plus? Yeah, it's just +1/+1. Yeah.
And then I played another equipment so I could draw it off my deck, and then I put it, played it, immediately attach it to SRAM. And I had like 16 cards in my hand, so SRAM was like and I played a Colossus Hammer too, and that immediately got attached.
Oh man!
So SRAM's like unblockable, and he's like a 28-26, and I like one-shotted the Karlov player, Taste of Karlov, and he was at 66 life, so that felt pretty good. He's just like 28 commander damage. You're done.
Bye.
And then the Dragon guy just like didn't he had a few dragons, but he didn't have enough. He got me down to like 5 health, but then I just like swing at him, and that's it. So it was
Unblockable.
Yeah, quite a comeback for old Voltron. So
Nice.
Yeah, don't knock commander damage. And one of my opponents was like, a few turns after the board wipe, like I wasn't really doing much, and he's like, "Yeah, mono white's tough." Yeah. Like, all right, well, you know what?
Was that the Corvold player?
That was the Taste of player. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, they were playing white too, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways, and at one point the Dragon player did play a Hellkite Tyrant, which is one of our favorite cards. Love that card.
Yeah.
And I just had one artifact. I had a Scour Glass on the field. Do you know that one?
Oh yeah. That's a nice one.
The Scour Glass is like 3 and 2 white, and you can sacrifice it to destroy all permanents except artifacts and lands, but you can only do it during your upkeep. And he took that and then just like didn't use it because he didn't want me to like blow up everything. And that was my only permanent. Everyone else had these big boards. So, but yeah, then like I said, came back, won the game.
Just out of nowhere, all the equipment, boom, in there.
Man, Hammer is on. It's the real deal. Just like when you don't have to pay equip costs, it's so broken.
It's good stuff.
So welcome to another episode of Turn 1 Soul Ring. This is the podcast where we talk about all things Magic the Gathering. And I'm Kevin.
And I'm Eric.
Shouldn't have said "and" before. That's your thing. And today on the show, we're going to be talking about how we tune our commander decks, but a lot of this can be applied to, any format.
Yeah, pretty much.
But before we get to that, we're going to talk a bit about our recent pre-release experience.
Got to go out to play some pre-release. I found it kind of interesting actually because it's been a little bit since
either of us did a pre-release.
Either of us, I think even a little longer for you. But I did find that like usually the morning one it was like super packed, and this time the morning one was lackluster in terms of like attendance.
Yeah, and
we do live in Winnipeg where it's extremely snowy and it was not the best morning for that.
And it was very snowy. We had like blowing snow. I think I shoveled like 5 times because we recorded the night before, and like after you left, I shoveled, and then the next morning I shoveled before
again,
pre-release.
yeah.
So, but you know, people that are signing up for pre-release, I mean, I guess people can just show up for pre-release. Like I usually sign up in advance, but
yeah, even apparently the 1 p.m. pod had more pre-buys, pre-signups than even the 10 a.m. So maybe things are changing a little bit.
maybe, yeah, who knows? Yeah, we'll have to see because the next one should be Ikoria, and that'll be April-ish.
Something?
I know the Commander decks come out on the 24th, so that should be, I guess, somewhere around there because they're
Probably.
like in tandem.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess before that though, it's mystery boosters. So I wonder what the attendance for that. That'll
really
be a draft
interesting.
format, but that'll be a very interesting, or just terrible because of how the
What
variants.
are other?
Yeah.
What's the card pool again? Over 1,000?
Plus like the 120 plus foils that aren't in the regular 1,200 card set. So
Yeah, like okay,
yikes,
wacky.
Yeah. So I didn't do great at the pre-release. I sort of had a really spread out card pool in terms of colors, and I ended up going with Gruul, so green, red, and like the Power 4 synergy, like that signpost uncommon that he can't attack unless you have a.
Oh yeah.
So I was doing kind of a mid-range thing, but I didn't have like that many bombs in those colors. I had a couple, but I just couldn't really but like my curve it looked so good. I did that part really well, and like my deck did roll out really well, but when it got into like the later turns and people were playing with these big bombs, I just couldn't really deal with them. And so yeah, I went 0-2, and then I dropped. But yeah, that was kind of my experience.
Again, I had a very awkward card pool.
Yeah, and your promo was a Scryland.
My promo was a Scryland, which I actually did run. Woo! Sort of on color, but I had a lot of green ramp. I had 3 of like the Caryatids, and then 2 of the enchantments where you grab a land, and 2 more of the enchantments where you can like enchant a land to make more mana.
Right.
So I had all this awesome ramp.
Yeah.
No payoff at all.
Nothing to do it with.
I had like the green guy that gives all your other creatures trample, and like that. That's it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm gonna take this stack of green cards and just put it to the side.
Yeah.
I ended up going white black. I had some okay. I had the Woe Strider, which was real good.
Yeah.
Coming back out with 2 +1/+1 counters is actually pretty strong.
Yeah,
So
Escape is like really, really good.
Escape was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Woe Strider was great. I had like the other flying Nightmare. It's 2 of anything and 2 black.
Oh yeah, what's that one
When a
called?
creature dies, you can exile it and make a 1/1 token.
Yeah.
So he was also the flying bomb. The other card that did a lot of work was Shadow Spear. Oh man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, really awesome in a format where we have a bunch of gods, right?
Oh,
that
yeah.
we just lose indestructible, and then you can.
But also giving your
them out.
creature +1/+1 and lifelink and trample.
Yeah.
It really gives a lot of life point swings when you're playing in like a limited format.
Oh, lifelink is so powerful.
Yeah.
In
and
limited.
And trample just getting through there is really
Yeah.
good.
Yep.
So then I had a lot of black stuff, and then I had Gary,
Oh yeah, nice.
so that I could try and do some drainage there.
Right.
And then because I was in white, there's a flicker spell, so I had 3 flicker spells in the deck as well.
Okay.
Which then, if I got Gary out, I could flicker him to like get the ETB trigger again and stuff like that. Flicker is also really good to protect against your guys being targeted by removal. So that really came into a lot of effect as well. So the deck kind of did do some things.
Yeah.
I had a really good first round. I lost in the end, but we had a really good back and forth. But the other guy played like a black-red deck, and he would like take my creature and then swing with it and then sacrifice it to like do more. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh wow, that's
pretty good.
that's pretty good. It's real fun when we get to do that.
Yeah.
And then I think I went against something like your deck round 2. It was like green-red, but didn't have much going on.
Yes. I think
Yeah.
there was a lot of that going around.
And then after that, I went against someone. Oh wait, I got that backwards. The first red green I went against, he had a lot of big stuff, and I just had nothing. He had removal, big creatures, couldn't do anything. Lost 2-0. And then yeah, round 4 was again another red black deck. He was stumbling around with his mana, so ended up just going 2-0 there again.
Oh,
So
nice.
the deck could do things, but yeah, I think the awkward card pool just didn't quite.
Yeah, and that's the risk you run when you do sealed,
Yeah.
right? Like draft is much more consistent because you can just take what you want for the most part.
Someone did mention it while we were there, and then I kind of noticed after this as well. Like pretty much everyone I went against was running red,
Yeah,
and red was very prevalent.
Yeah.
It's because red has a lot of good removal. It has that aura that when it enters deals 4 damage, and there's a lot of other smaller
Yes.
common red spells.
I saw that a lot.
Yeah, so I find it very common for people to be running red.
Yeah, just to
Yeah.
get the removal for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you get any good pulls?
Woe Strider.
Woe Strider? Yeah.
Oh, and the land, I guess.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
foil.
It's foil.
It's good.
Sure. Yeah. Oh well, like my promo was Allure of the Unknown, and though I wanted to like pick that card up and put it in a deck, it's not very expensive. So
Yeah, it's not
I
the
would've-
best for a seeded rare.
But it still feels good to open a card that you wanted to put in a deck.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a fun card, but yeah, it's that's what happens sometimes.
Yeah. That being said, we did also go with our friend Rylan,
Yeah, who's been on the show before?
and he opened Elspeth and a bunch of other
Yeah.
crazy stuff, and he
did-
went 4-0 right to the end.
He did very well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Elspeth, good card.
Yeah. No, and
like-
escape. Like I had a couple of escape cards, and like I wasn't so sure about the mechanic because a lot of times it seems like you have to exile quite a bit of cards, but it could really swing board states,
Oh, yeah.
which is it's a very very cool mechanic. But yeah, if any of you guys went to pre-release and you want to let us know what it was like, you can find us and message us on Instagram at Turn One Soaring the Podcast, and the link for that is in the show notes, as well as all the other platforms you can find us on. One more thing, while we're on the subject of Theros Beyond Death, if you haven't yet entered our January giveaway, you can also find that on our Instagram page and all the entry details. And we do ship worldwide, so just keep that in mind. Yeah, that'll be wrapping up pretty soon. So go check it out.
Check it out.
So let's first off, let's talk about why you might want to tune your deck.
Sure.
So a couple of obvious reasons would be that you want to make a deck more powerful or less powerful. And, that could be taking whatever the strategy of the deck is and making it more consistent and efficient, right?
I think that's usually where we see more of the tuning, making
Yeah.
a deck more powerful. You get to play with it, and then you can see what's working well, what's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like more powerful, that's sort of what it means, because it's kind of a subjective
That
term
is a
to
subjective
use.
too, in terms of like powerful, actually like just working and doing like what you want it to.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's going to be a more powerful deck, but it's just smoother.
Yeah. Doesn't mean you're going to win more games, but it'll definitely feel better to pilot it.
Yeah.
I think you're always doing things. That's what you want out of a deck, any deck really. And you'd kind of do I don't know if you wouldn't really do the opposite to power down a deck. I think you'd, and we'll get into that, like what you'd
Yeah.
really do to power a deck down, because you don't just want it to be you don't want it to be a bad deck. Yeah, bad deck.
You do want to still have fun playing. So,
Exactly. Yeah. That's the name of the game here. So, another reason you'd want to tune a deck is to change the strategy or to devote more resources to a particular strategy. Like if a deck had several different win conditions, something like that.
Yeah, even like to take, for example, my Brea deck, when I first built it, I was like, I'm just going to throw as many 2-card combos in there as possible.
Yeah.
And it's like, how often do you see those? Like, So it's like, takes about, make it more tight.
Right. Yeah. Add more card draw, things like that, just to like get what I need.
Oh, yeah. And then also on tuning decks, just as another side note, it's always good to keep up on all the new card sets. Like we just had Theros come out. And then, just reading through the sets and seeing like what cards
Yep.
you like. Remember what decks you have and take notes of cards, because you may want to add them later and stuff like that too. So
Yeah.
it's always good to keep in mind.
Yeah, I actually have a list of like all my decks, of like all the formats, just on my phone, just in notes.
Yeah.
And and then I'll have a list of like cards that'll like for sure want to try in decks, and then some cards that'll be like, okay, I'll put a question mark next to it, and then I'll have to like check, and it's a whole Saturday for me. But that's kind of what I do during spoiler season. Is like, ooh, that would be good in like this deck.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
Nally's Intervention. That seems really good in a lands deck. Like,
that card is so good. I can't.
so good.
It's unbelievable.
I did get one in my pool. So
you did,
I have that card.
You did another green card. You couldn't run.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's get to the main topic and talk about how we tune our decks. So I thought a good example of this would be to kind of use our Commander League decks as like a jumping off point, because that's a deck that at least you and I both recently not built but had to work on, because I haven't built a new deck since before that. I haven't built a new Commander deck. Well, I mean, we've built decks for the show, but
other than that,
yeah. So the first thing to do when thinking about tuning a deck is to decide what your deck is trying to do. And I think you could also apply that to when you start building a new deck. You want to decide what the goal of the deck is, or what the win condition is, like how this deck is going to win.
Yeah.
And we usually talk about that when we do a deck tech. It's kind of like how is this deck planning on winning?
Yeah, it's like, let's start with that. What's the game plan?
Yeah.
How are we going to try and take out the opponents?
Go from there. Yeah. And I mean, that is like the goal, right? It's to kill your opponents. But how?
Or alternate win con. I
win, yes. Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, or you could just make like a divine intervention deck, and then it's just a draw.
There you go.
Yeah, that works too.
Sure.
Once you've decided that, you want to look for cards that help you achieve that goal.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's also good to think about, let's say, you want card draw cards, you want ramp cards, you want removal, but any cards that do those specific things, but also help your win condition, have better synergy with your deck than a card that just like divination that just draws you 2 cards, right?
Correct, yeah. And if we take like Teysa Karlov, who likes
death triggers,
right? So you're going to be wanting stuff that has something happens when the creature dies, like the new afterlife mechanic and stuff like that. So you're going to be looking at that stuff.
Yeah.
So like a good way to one good way I've found to find certain cards that like do what your deck wants to do is that you can check out Gatherer or Scryfall, and you can actually put in the card text part
right
as to like what's in there. Like if I want to draw on my upkeep, I can put like upkeep draw. Yeah. And it'll kind of bring up all the cards that do certain things on upkeeps in terms of drawing cards.
That's right.
Yeah. And so you can find similar effects in cards you may not have known of.
Right. Yeah, and you can just do that. I've never done it on Scryfall, but yeah, with the Gatherer, you just go to like the advanced search function.
Yeah, I'm sure Scryfall works the same, but I've always just used Gatherer before, so.
Yeah. I usually go to Scryfall if I need like high-res images of cards, because Gatherer's images are not so good. So an example of like a way to tune your deck would be, let's say your deck isn't drawing enough cards, and you're always top decking the games that you play it, and that does not feel good, not having any cards in your hand.
No.
Yeah. So you can, obviously put in more card draw effects to remedy this problem, but what should you take out? And when I'm thinking about taking cards out of, and you want to add cards, you're thinking about, you have to take cards out, right? Because there's both a minimum and a maximum.
You can't just run 120 cards.
No. That's usually how my EDH decks look before I have to start making cuts. It's just like, let's just throw everything in here, and then we're going to have to start removing things.
Yeah.
So I always start by looking at the mana curve. And so I separate my cards into basically 2 groups. And one group, I'll have the cards that are essential to the win condition or win conditions. And the other group, I'll have the cards that aren't essential. So this is like a pretty broad way to do it.
Yeah.
And you could apply that same metric to mana ramp and removal packages of your deck, or kind of like whatever else, like some, I'll often have like a protection part, or like card draw and card selection, or even lands, right? Like you can have all kinds of utility lands that help you with your win condition.
Yeah, totally.
Or just help with the synergy of your deck.
Yeah, and then obviously doing this, like if you have your deck and you just have making like physical groups of the cards can also help you visualize like what you have going on and how many cards you have for each area.
Absolutely. That's so, it's like taking out a card that's very much at the highest point of your mana curve to put in, a card that draws you more cards. That is going to make your deck a little bit more efficient because then your deck's not bogged down with that very expensive spell, like let's say like Rise from the Dark Realms. And if you want to put in a card like Sign in Blood, right, like that's going to help you a lot better in the early game, like get to those later turns.
Yeah.
Whereas like Rise to the Dark Realms in your opening hand, you don't really want that.
No, it's not doing anything for you at all.
That being said, that's a very good card. So, if your deck needs it, just throw it in there. Keep it in there, rather. You sort of mentioned mana curve, but let's sort of explain what that is to everybody. So
the nitty gritty of the curve.
Yeah, and this is actually something. This is something that like if you play a lot of limited, or if you want to get good at like the mana curve and really understanding it and get better at building decks, I think limited is a really good route to take because you have to do that constantly.
Definitely.
So a little explanation of what mana curve is it's by organizing the cards that are going to go into your deck by their casting cost. You can see how likely it is going to be able to optimally utilize each turn's mana, which means you want to play a card or cards with a casting cost or cost with a total equal to the mana available on that turn. So turn 1 drop, turn 2 drop, etc.
And getting to limited even a little bit, how this really helps you is that like when you lay out all your cards and you're like, I have 10 3 CMC cards. That's not a good mana curve because you have way too many cards in that 3-drop slot. And so that can really help you, okay, I have to nix some of these cards and bring in some other stuff because it's looking much too heavy in a single slot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and in limited, you do want to have more cards in like the 3 mana slot than I would say any other slot.
Yeah.
But that's too many.
10 is still like
10 out of 20. Yeah, 10 out of 23 is just too many, which is usually how many cards you want to be running. That, and then 17 lands, the average, yeah. Although I guess if you had that many 3-drops, you could probably stand to lose a land.
Good.
If you were just going to go like 3-drop tribal, I don't know. So, with in addition to mana curve, there's also mana distribution or like color distribution. So like the your ability to make certain colors of mana.
Yeah.
Fixing. So we'll talk about color balance and mana distribution shortly. But you can think of your mana curve in any deck like a wave, right? So if you grouped your cards according to CMC, like if you had them out on your playmat, you'd have the highest concentration of cards from like 3 to 4 CMC in Commander, I would say, and then that would be like the apex of the wave.
Sure, yeah.
And then it would go down, so you'd have fewer cards at like the 0 to 1 drop, and the most cards at 3 to 4, and then you'd like pitter down like 5, 6.
Yeah.
Once you get to like 7 and 8, like you don't really want to have too many of those cards. And the only time you would have a lot of those cards would probably be in a deck where you have an ability to cast a lot of big spells for without paying their mana cost.
Yeah, or then if you're like have like a ton of ramp going on, you're like, I have a good amount of bigger creatures. So it's like I do have a lot more in like the 5 or 6. Like it kind of like evens out a little bit more, but
yeah, for sure.
That's just like it does pertain deck to deck, but kind of a general idea. It's nice to have like a good wave.
Yeah, and I suppose like if I think about like if a Kozilek, the Great Distortion deck, like that's probably like I have a lot more cards at like the 1 and 2 curve, and then the like 6, 7, 8, 9 curve then in the middle, because you have to have so much, you're in colorless, so you have to have so much artifact ramp so you can play those big spells on like turn 5, turn 4 or 5. So yeah, you do it is going to be a little bit different, and for things like that, for decks like that where it's outside the norm, it's not the best idea to like look at the average CMC of a deck and be trying to lower that, because it's not really what's happening in that situation. But and like I used to organize my decks this way, like on a playmat with my physical cards. But since we started doing the show, I've been using Deckstats for pretty much all my decks. I haven't put all my decks on there, but like it's a great resource for tuning your deck. And if you really want to get that CMC down, you can do that.
I have to say, Deckstats is really awesome for showing
just everything
stats
yes.
of your deck.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, like Deckstats is a great tool. It has a very nice UI user interface. And it's really nice, even with your mana curve, is it kind of like sections off like what color cards you have in each section.
Yeah.
You like hover over it and it'll tell you like how many. It's like, oh, you have 3 blue spells, 2 green spells, 4 red spells, and stuff like that. So cool.
Yeah, it's a great resource. Yeah, we've already said like lowering the CMC of a deck you want to speed up is essential. You know, you don't want to lower it so much that you're taking away from the win condition, right? You always want to keep that in the forefront. Because
if you take away too many of your win cons, you're like, I have so much card draw and mana ramp. I'll be good. And
all you're going to be doing. Yeah.
That's all you're doing.
Yeah. So let's move on to mana distribution. This is a fun one.
Yeah, this one was definitely. This is probably can be a more difficult part of making a deck as well.
I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that being said, you don't ever really have to, as long as you have internet access or a local game store near you, you don't really ever have to like deal with this without help, right? Like if you're at a pre-release event or if you're at a limited event, feel free to like ask someone that or someone that's very experienced at these events. Just ask them like, how many lands do you need? And most people are nice enough that they'll just give you a legitimate, helpful answer.
Yeah, that has been my experience, and even like just the people that run our LGS that we go to.
Yeah,
they're even super helpful as well.
Like, yeah.
Hey, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like, can you give me a little second help? Like,
yeah,
they're great for that. Which is really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure. So, mana distribution, just as a quick explanation, it's making sure you have the right mana producing sources in your deck to cast all of your spells. So ramping is important, like we always talk about, but fixing is just as important, if not maybe more so.
Yeah,
it's probably like neck and neck for importance. But if you don't have the right mana to cast your ramp spells, you're kind of
you're stuck in the dust.
Yeah. So like we said, like this is something that limited experience will help a ton. But if you're not into draft or limited, then you can just use online resources. And we've talked about how many lands you should run in a commander deck before, so we don't want to repeat ourselves. And it is a little bit subjective as well, like everything we're talking about. But and if you want to find out about that content, you can go back and listen to episode 19. Check that out. We also talk about rotation, so you might just want to like skip past that because that was the last standard rotation, like in September of last year. Yeah, I've used various mana calculators over the years, but I like pretty much just use Deckstats for all that stuff. And even if you go to a sealed event, you can have Deckstats up on your phone. You can like punch your deck in there if you want, if you have time.
Totally.
And do that too.
Yeah, I never thought about that, but you could totally do that. Yeah. And again, speaking about Deckstats, I just recently made a deck. Hint, hint, next episode. Just coming.
Don't tease them, Eric.
But it was really nice to, again, talking about the mana curve and being able to like look at how it tells you how much mana you have per permanence in the deck.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I think I need this many and this many of the basic lands, and then it was just like it shows you the percentage in like a pie circle,
right?
And you can kind of like, even if you're off a little bit, you can be like, oh, okay, I need to take one of these out and put it in one of these, and then you're like good, right?
Yeah.
It's really nice for that, and I got it bang on,
Yeah, and don't skimp on your basic lands. All right, eat your vegetables.
Totally.
Those are the vegetables of any deck, especially commanders, the basic lands.
And that being said, even when you're going for let's say like a 5-color deck, yes, you do want to have all your mana, but sometimes people out there are running certain cards.
Ruination.
Or
Blood Moon.
Someone may have a Blood Moon in there, and so you're going to want to have you're going to have basic decks, or somebody even a basic land, sorry, and if somebody maybe even does like a Field of Ruin, you want to be able to search out that basic land.
Exactly.
So it's always good to have basics in your deck. Don't ever like run 0 because there's going to be times where you're just going to feel bad for it.
Yeah. They're going to be few and far between, but I think you just want to avoid it.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good.
It doesn't feel good.
So yeah, staying on the topic of lands. So it's always good to put as many dual lands into your deck as possible. Assuming they don't have any drawbacks, like, well, entering the battlefield tapped. That's probably the biggest one. If it does enter the battlefield tapped, I think you want to have the ability to choose, like with a shock land.
Yeah, shock lands are always good for that.
Exactly.
Those ones that enter the battlefield and give you 1 life.
Yeah, it's not the worst thing in the world.
But still, that's not the kind of things you want to go for.
No, like the scry lands, I would say, are good because you get the scry. But I think I'd rather have the like the check lands, right, or even the pain lands, which I think are somewhat underutilized.
Yeah, those as well, because those are nice. Because if you do have them early, like you may be taking a little bit of damage, but it still taps for colorless later on, so you're fine.
Yeah, and you have 40 life.
Yeah,
like, what's the big deal?
It's a resource.
So, I'd say the same thing goes for signets because there really isn't any drawback to running those, especially like Arcane Signet.
If you're in 2 colors or more, just throw Arcane Signet in the deck, straight up.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Like.
And I think like too, like, in the same way we're talking about like lands, dual lands with drawbacks, like 3 mana rocks, most of them, the fact that they're 3 mana is a drawback. So for me to run a 3 mana rock, it really has to be doing something that the deck wants to do for me to get behind wanting to run it.
Sure.
Like Commander Sphere is a pretty good one because you can sacrifice it. Well, you just sacrifice it even if it's tapped. You still get to draw a card.
That's really good about that one because you don't have to tap it to sacrifice. You can still use it for mana and then get the card draw.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'd really consider like once we get past the 2 mana rocks, I get a lot more. What's the word I'm looking for? Choosy. Yeah. But yeah,
like taking like Thran Dynamo, for example,
which is
4 mana and it taps for 3, so you can use it right away.
Yeah, or like
but it's like if you have a lot of cards in your deck that need colored mana, Thran Dynamo may not be the best choice for that deck.
And the same thing sort of in the same vein, but like Ancient Tomb, which taps for 2 colorless mana, but you take 2 damage every time you do it. That is a great card.
Yeah.
And it's at home in many, many, many decks. But I wouldn't run that in, say, in a 5-color deck.
Yeah.
Just because it's so colored mana hungry that card isn't necessarily helping me do what I want to do.
Exactly.
So
you're gonna have times where you're like, oh, I take 2 damage and I'm only using 1 of the colorless mana. Kind of feels bad.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about that. Like, I think Ancient Tomb would be pretty good in like an Dragon deck, but a lot of 5-color commanders, they don't have colorless mana cost on them.
Yeah.
But a lot of my 5-color experience piloting a deck is just for my Slivers deck, and a lot of it's besides the other spells, it's a lot of just colored mana cost for Slivers. So I don't know, maybe I should put an Ancient Tomb in there.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do it. So once you've gotten all the pieces of a deck together or decided, it's time to look at the land base and mana distribution. So we've already talked about like how you can use Deckstats, and there's a link. There's always a link in all our episode descriptions of both Eric and mine's list of decks on Deckstats. You can go check any of those out. But on Deckstats, you have it when you go to like analyze a deck after you put in all the cards, it gives you 2 metrics. They're right next to each other, and one of them is mana source and mana source distribution. So the first one tells you how many colored or colorless like mana symbols of each color you have in a deck in the form of a percentage. And those won't change unless you remove or add cards with mana costs.
Yeah, and those are the things that I was saying before that are actually in like a nice like pie diagram, and it shows you the percentages. So you can also get a visual of how much it's taking up in your deck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the mana source distribution represents how many color or colorless producing mana sources you have in the deck. And those won't change unless you add or remove like lands that produce mana or other permanents that produce mana.
Yeah.
And I wonder if those are affected by cards like Dark Ritual.
Oh yeah.
Or they wouldn't really be affected by High Tide because that's like or like Bubbling Muck because that's very much,
I think it'll still just care, like, even though it's making it more mana, I think it still just counts as like the one.
I think so.
Yeah.
Probably. We should email them and find out.
Sure.
So just as a little example, like if you're building, let's say you have like a Bant colored deck, like you have like an Arcades deck and it requires more blue mana. You can remove a basic Plains and add a Hallowed Fountain, which taps for both blue and white. So you're effectively keeping the white producing source and adding an additional blue producing source of mana. That's basically how that works.
And talking about like a 3-color deck, back when we first started playing Commander, when I was building my Animar deck, I just threw in the lands that I had, and I was like, oh, I need 15 basics, so I'm just gonna do 5 blue, 5 red, 5 green.
5 and 5.
Yeah, and I was like, it's nice and even. And then of course playing the deck, I'm like, I have so many mountains, I do not need these.
Yeah.
I always have this red mana that I'm like, I don't need this.
This isn't working for me.
This isn't working. And so it's like, don't just do stuff because it's even, because the cards in your deck probably aren't going to look that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, and just like that and everything else we've talked about today, the best tool in terms of tuning a deck, I would say, is experiencing like the experience of piloting it and playing the game in general.
Yeah, totally.
So let's move on to sort of where we started here. It's tuning down your deck. So, like we said, this doesn't mean that you're making the deck less. It doesn't mean you're making the deck worse, but you are making it less powerful. So you'll probably be tuning a deck down because it's too powerful for your meta, and as a result, it isn't fun for your friends to play against, or people at the local game store think you're a shark, and they're always targeting you, even if you're saying like, no, it's not that kind of. It's not that kind of Mikaeus deck.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I think it is. So, whatever the case may be that you want to tune your deck down, I think a great way to power down a deck is to remove some of the pieces of removal and add some high CMC kind of splashy spells. And this came up last night when I was playing Commander at our local game store, and I was saying how like the game that the game that I was talking about, sort of at the preamble, there weren't any board wipes except that Pernicious Deed and the board wipe I played. So there's 2 board wipes, but I was saying how to the guys I was playing with how uncommon the amount of board wipes are in that meta, if you want to call it that, versus just when we're playing, when Eric and I are playing with our friends, in a private scenario. Like I think like 5 to 7 board wipes is a good amount to run in a deck. But a lot of times when I talk to people at this game store, like they'll run like 1 or 2.
I know some people won't even run any.
Right. And, one of the guys last night when I, was sort of talking about that, he said like, well, like I would rather play the cards, I want to play, and then like let everybody have fun. And, for that guy, removal isn't fun. And, fun is subjective, right?
It is.
So, whatever blows your hair back. But, sometimes you're in situations like I was in where you've got nothing on the board and everyone else is doing really well and you just need to even the playing field. That's what board wipes are for.
Yeah.
Right?
Because you still want to play the game too.
Exactly.
You just even it up a little bit.
Exactly. So, taking out some, maybe not taking out board wipes, maybe taking out some more like targeted removal, some lower CMC spells, and then adding, like Mind's Dilation.
Yeah.
Right? Just cards are like Atali Primal Storm. Just like big cards that do kind of like
some fun things,
right? Some things that are just like unexpected. I think that's a great way to change the power level of a deck.
Yeah. Throw in one of the Primordials. Minus Sylvan Primordial, the green one, because that's banned.
It's banned, yeah. Yeah, throw in like an Insurrection or a Rise from the Dark Realms. Just like have fun with it. that being said, I wouldn't want to remove any pieces of card draw or ramp because even with a less powerful deck, you still want to be doing things on curve and every turn.
That's true.
Because I'd say when you're sitting there not doing anything, when you're stuck on lands or you don't have any cards in hand, that's probably the least fun position to be in.
Very much the least fun. And of course, there are situations where you may have like a very close meta where you play with 4 friends all the time, and you'll have a deck that it's like, okay, like we have a meta where there's just no fast mana. So
sure,
yeah, and that can also just be like a different way to play.
Yeah, exactly. Or you have like banned cards, or like a combo can only happen. Like the same combo can only happen like 5 times or 10 times, right?
Yeah,
so you just can't.
We have friends that play in the play group that do that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like whatever works for the play group, right? And a lot of that is just communication. Like that's the most important thing. So that's pretty much our experience so far with tuning our decks. And like we said, it's really more intuition and experience over straight up numbers.
Yeah.
Because sometimes a lot of times a card can seem really good and it fits into your curve and you have the right colors for it, but sometimes it's just wrong for the deck. It's sort of like if you meet someone and you're attracted to them, but it's just not going to work.
Yeah, or then like say for example you have a deck that's doing the stacks thing and you have like Rest in Peace and such in the deck, but then you're also running Rise of the Dark Realms. It's like Rise of the Dark Realms is a good card, but you're also shutting off everyone's graveyard, so you're not getting any value off that card. Probably in some of the games. Yeah. And, I've had cards too where I just like never draw them. Yeah. They'd be like such bombs in the deck, but I just like Oath of Teferi in my Brago deck. Sure. I never drew that card. I always had lots of Planeswalkers. I was always using them twice a turn, but I never, once got like the 4 Planeswalker activation in a turn. And, for me, I'll just take a card out, like, if I put it in and, like, I'm not, it sounds a little superstitious, but it's just like, I don't, if I don't see the card, I'm like, okay, well, then it might as well not be in the deck. You know what I mean? And as long as it's not a card that's like, because, like, Oath of Teferi wasn't how I was winning those games, right? That would just, like, added value to the deck. But anyways, do whatever you want. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm talking about when I say like intuition, right? Like if the card seems good and for all intents and purposes it is good, but it's just not working, take it out of the deck. Don't force it. Yeah. So we're just gonna bring this shorter episode to a close, and want to thank you all so much for listening. And if you have anything to share with us regarding your tune-up regiment, we'd love to hear about it. And you can find us on Instagram at Turn1SoulRing, the podcast, as usual. And you can also find us on all the podcast platforms, as well as YouTube. We have all our episodes up on YouTube now, so if you're a YouTube podcast listener, check it out. Come check us out.
All right, well, we appreciate each and every one of you that listens, and we will talk to you all next week.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Turn 1 Soul Ring.